So, thank you and welcome back.
Wisdom what says for wisdom I think a kind of human intelligence that actually I think the one of the unique thing about human brain. The other animals, I think some has a very low degree of intelligence, but we humans or brain is something really much advanced. So then, I think now better to use Tibetan. Lo jizambadi yu jibin de yu de she.
In the Buddhist understanding,
or I think ancient according ancient Indian
thought.
Yeah.
So according to classical Indian thought, any cognitive event or any cognitive faculty is recognized as having the capacity to know, to be aware.
The shedan delaya wombu shebe any yu shedan chik yilu tope yu shedan chik pejmenda isri.
So, however, a distinction is drawn between how we acquire knowledge or understanding or awareness with relation to our sensory faculties, we engage with the world, and also mental experience at the level of mind itself. So when we speak about prajna, which is the Sanskrit term in Tibetan shirap, that is translated as wisdom, we are really talking about our ability to know at this second mental level, not at the sensory level. So this faculty so although there is an understanding that any mental activity has this capacity to be aware of, to engage with the object. However, when we speak of this particular faculty, translated as wisdom, this prajna, then we are really talking at the level of mental experience. So that kind of faculty need not be present in all cognitive experiences. So this morning we had discussion about how there are two primary types of mental processes. One tends to be more in the form of aspiration, yearning, and wish, and compassion belongs to that class. And there is the other category of mental engagement that tends to be more cognitively oriented, and wisdom and intelligence and insight belongs to that category.
And shirm nyumu jensu do shirm means that yako never tamang time never nishib do yedu jmendo that the lot of jigare ta because captain sama yedu jigi any you never tending it ta churto namji shirm so ta so
within this domain where our mental engagement is much more cognitively oriented, where the role of insight and understanding and intelligence plays a greater role. And there can be both distorted forms. Sometimes we can be very sure of a certain understanding that we develop, but it may have no basis in reality. Those are kind of forms of wisdom, but they are kind of distorted forms of wisdom or understanding. But then there could be other forms of understanding which are really more in tune with reality, which are grounded in reality. These are the correct forms of understanding, which are referred to as prajna or wisdom.
So, I think when we carry investigation, then the wisdom side is now implementing, utilizing. So in our daily life, it's that intelligence or wisdom, you see, every time is used. And dream time also, sometimes a subject to which we much involve in daytime, investigate. That same sort of kind of investigation may carry in dream. So that milam gisheve korea shirde.
So this indicates that this faculty of wisdom or prajna is active even in our dream state.
In fact, I think dream state, the basic mind more subtler than the state of awakening state.
Waking state.
Waking state. So, if someone, I think some sort of technique, then maybe the dream state mind may be more sharper for further investigation. So these sort of mind or intelligence by itself just a neutral. Neutral. Can be either constructive and destructive. It must depend on motivation. Other factor.
Another factor.
And similarly, wishing, basically,
similarly, those forms of more aspiring and yearning type of mental states are also very much dependent upon the motivation, whether they can be constructive or negative.
So then, actually, I just want to see the exact meaning of psychology. What is the exact meaning? I quite often use word psychology, but I don't know the exact meaning.
At the risk of...
I'm expect. You see later
discussion.
One of you, please explain the exact meaning. Then, see, in Tibetan, the psychologists had the exact meaning I don't know. So you see, these different mind or thought. Some may belong psychology, some may not, I don't know. So in order to know that, it is very essential to know the exact meaning of psychology.
Well, the problem is, Solon is pointing out that his understanding of these mental phenomena is drawn from classical Indian and Tibetan sources, and when translating across the disciplines, across language, when we use the English term psychology, to what extent it overlaps to the phenomena that the classical text describes and his understanding is based on, becomes problematic.
Yes, that's all.
Okay. Well, thank you. That is a wonderful introduction. And if I may, I'd like to introduce our panelists this afternoon to you. We can begin with Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who you know and recently saw in Dharamsala. And for people, I think probably most people in the audience know him as well. He's the founder and former director of the Stress Reduction Clinic at the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where he is also an emeritus professor of medicine. His life work has been dedicated to introducing mindfulness practice into mainstream Western cultures and studying its clinical applications. To his left is Dr. Alyssa Eli. She's a psychiatrist on the faculty of Harvard Medical School who is well known for her thoughtful writings about seriously mentally ill patients in the Boston Globe and the New York Times, and for her poetic descriptions of clinical work and the suffering of major mental illness on National Public Radio. Her compassion and wisdom around the power and mystery of listening is reflected in these stories. To my right is Dr. Marcia Linehan. She's the director of the Behavioral Research and Therapy Clinics and professor of psychology at the University of Washington in Seattle. She's renowned as the developer of dialectical behavior therapy, which effectively combines cognitive and behavioral techniques with acceptance and mindfulness practice to treat patients who have difficulty regulating both their emotions and their behavior. And finally, a gentleman who may be able to answer your question about what we think psychology is Dr. Steven Pinker. He is an experimental psychologist on the faculty of Harvard College. He is world famous for his research on the acquisition and psychology of language, words, visual cognition, and how the mind works. He too has been named one of the 100 most influential people by Time magazine. And related to the topic of our panel, he's interested in the psychological dynamics of war and the limitations of nonviolence. So, to begin our discussion, if I can ask Dr. Kabat-Zinn to lead us off.
Well, Your Holiness, it's wonderful to see you again. And I would say wonderful to have this kind of gathering under the auspices of the Harvard Medical School. I feel that you are probably the most important figure in the world right now, giving voice to the need for greater compassion and wisdom in the world. That gives an enormous amount of inspiration to people far and wide to actually inquire deeply as to what wisdom and what compassion would require in this particular state of the world at this moment. So I just want to express my profound appreciation on the part of myself, but also I would say on the part of all of us here for your willingness to take this transformational point position, because the world is in so sorry need of what we are inquiring about today. I also dare say that it would be something of a stretch for the Harvard Medical School to actually hold an entire two-day symposium on meditation and psychotherapy with the subtext of wisdom and compassion without your presence. That's not to say it wouldn't happen, but it certainly is catalytic, I would say. So I love that you just brought up the question of what psychology actually is, because we've been sitting here this morning asking you questions about, like, what is the nature of compassion, and we're going to talk about the nature of wisdom. So I think it's only fair that it be bi-directional. And as you know, when that subject came up in Dharamsala 2 weeks ago around emotion, it became very clear to all that even from the Western scientific perspective of the study of emotion, that it's very, very hard to define precisely what emotion is and how it is distinguished from cognition or from mood or anything like that. So we are swimming in a sea that is a little bit imprecise. At the same time, we always have to come back to the first noble truth, and that is the actuality of the enormity of the suffering in this world. And whether there are ways for human beings, both individually and collectively, to address this suffering. And certainly psychotherapy is one of the most profound ways that the West has developed for trying to reach out to human beings who are suffering, especially at the domain of the mind. But since we don't differentiate fundamentally between mind and body, it concerns the whole human being, and address this suffering. And I might say that then there's also the collective suffering of the planet, because so much of the destructive energies of the human mind, when it doesn't know itself, get replicated in the social environment, in the banking environment, to pick something out of the hat, or the fate of the planet, the danger of the ecology of the planet to human harm. So we're really talking here about some things you mentioned this morning, which is, can we understand something profoundly about the nature of the mind and the nature of reality? And when you were asked the question about, give us one easy meditation that we could do that would just kind of make everything a little bit better, I felt you very skillfully said, no thank you, because the human mind is so complex that we don't want to suggest one thing, we'll just kind of do it. But at the same time, you did mention the meditation on impermanence, and then you also mentioned deep inquiry into anatta, or the nature of the self. And so it seems to me that the nature of the self and its relationship to impermanence and suffering are very, very important in the field of psychotherapy. Whether we're talking about an individual or we're talking about human behavior on a global scale. So my question to you, to open up the afternoon's discussion or dialogue, is really around the nature of the self, and whether when you use the word wisdom, there's a particular way in which the perspective of prajna has to do with the nature of reality of what we think of as myself, and whether there's some kind of understanding beyond our thoughts about ourselves. In other words, are we who we think we are, or are we something else, larger, more profound than who we think we are? And are there ways, to come back to Richard Davidson's question this morning, to actually practice or cultivate wisdom hand in hand with compassion? Sometimes I know they're spoken of as like the two wings of a bird, the compassion and wisdom. So are there ways that you can share with us that might be useful in the domain of human suffering, that have to do with the actual deepening and cultivation of wisdom and how it would hold compassion? A little complicated.
I think firstly, although this is very, very complicated subject, but I think one obvious thing is, perhaps in our in generally, those people who have some kind of self-centered sort of egoistic attitude,
grasping
that kind of strong then such person, I think sometimes more sensitive about the other's attitude. Some nice word come, very happy. A little uncomfortable word come, immediately it's much reaction disturbed. Then person who not that much sort of strong sort of grasping. Nice word, okay, good. But no, not that much sort of
excitement.
Excitement. And negative word, also okay. That kind of thing, feeling, attitude. Right. That I think happening, isn't it? So in that case, now Buddhist explanation is as I mentioned before, in the mind or thought, I think here we can divide two groups. One, a negative or destructive, which no basis of validity.
No.
Another, constructive, based on valid
grounds.
So now the first category, first one, because based on ultimately ignorance. So no valid. Now ignorance, there are many variety of ignorance. But here ignorance is very strong self-grasping. So self is there. Nobody can deny that. Self is there. It's a reality. But now here, appearance and reality, there's always gap. So now regarding self, appears something independent, which owned our body and mind. And the reality, if we investigate beside body and mind, we can't find self as one entity, independent, separate entity. So appears, there could be separate entity. Reality, no. So that's the Buddhist concept of selflessness. So that, now the other one, you see the feeling or self-grasping that self something independently exists. Now that's ignorance now. So that based, or as basis, then other attachment or fear or many things. Fear also, I think, with reasons, that's not based on ignorance. But much sort of exaggerated sort of thing, fear is very much related with that ignorance. And then attachment, I think attachment, that also you see we need, you see, because of that.
Precise definition.
Precise definition. But generally, you see, attachment and desire, two separate things. Desire, they are reasonable. So they desire with reasons. Desire, now for example, here, you see, everybody has desire to achieve happy, joyful life. That desire is right. And as a Buddhist, desire to achieve Buddhahood. That desire is right, positive. And meantime now here, or desire want Buddhahood, but based on that grasping, self-grasping, grasping, that also consider negative. the desire itself right, the valid basis. But because related based on that grasping, sort of the ignorance, so it already, then it whole things will spoil.
Yeah.
So this was negative. Don't dissatisfy when mar asore. Ma tendu to shembe kwane any nekewasasa or netibasasa give not.
So, in fact, one of the Buddhist texts states that if someone engages in a virtuous act based on a very strong sense that I, as an independent ego, exist, then that pursuit may seem like virtuous, but actually it's not virtuous.
So now here, yesterday also I mentioned, I feel the faith, strong faith, unshakable, one-pointed faith, according to theistic religion, God, so tremendous sort of one-pointed faith. Although it's different than the Buddhist sort of wisdom of
No self.
no self. But some, I think, similar effect. The faith towards God. Then at that time, it effect now self not important. God, Creator, you are totally sort of what's the day, disposal or totally sort of devoted. So some sense of selfless. So that I think, generally speaking, more or less same effect. When Kunjosum ya Zeshibe Taba, Yanan Rosimjania, Rangim Lunga Yisum, Rosimjatara, Pushen, the nigger lot Zeshikuchuzane, Nasia Sujodi, Ranzimur Hamaswa.
For example, in the Buddhist teachings,
So the Jibu or something.
we speak of a practitioner being single-pointed in his or her kind of reverence to the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And that has an effect of releasing this grasping at self and ego. Similarly, a practitioner who dedicates his entire being, body, speech, and mind, for the welfare of...
Nagarjuna stated, Satachu, the medical conversation, Tao, Sanjatamji, Rangar Gami, Jaja shops, Zane, ego the midwa.
For example, a bodhisattva practitioner who dedicates his or her entire being for the benefit of other sentient beings and dedicates to the service for others, as articulated in Nagarjuna's prayer, where he makes the aspiration, may I become like the elements such as earth, water, fire, and so on, so that all sentient beings can utilize me in whatever way they wish. So that kind of dedication can have an effect on releasing this kind of grasping at a strong sense of ego, self-centeredness.
So these are not wisdom side, but some effect on the egoistic sort of strong egoistic feeling. So now here we need this in a very subtle way distinction. Otherwise, on the other hand, you see, in order to dedicate oneself, one's body, mind, speech, totally dedicated for well-being of entire sentient being, you need tremendous sort of will, tremendous sort of self-confidence, and strong sort of say, feeling of strong self.
Sense of self.
Sense of self. Otherwise, you can't practice such thing. So, strong self. There are two, one positive, one negative. One based on wisdom, one based on ignorance. So we have to make distinction. But the other word, so the real person is, I lost now. Now theistic religion, according to theistic religion, firstly, this is other some reasons. This is to bring conviction, God.
Faith in God.
Their wisdom worked. Then bring the enthusiasm of practice of compassion and admiration of compassion. So that way, one way. Then non-theistic, again, the knowledge, fuller knowledge about law of causality. That's work for wisdom. So that brings conclusion that they need compassion. Then, this morning, also, as of the secular way, there also is we need utilize our common sense, our common experience, and latest scientific findings. Through that way, we should bring conviction. These positive emotions are good for oneself, for the society, for the family, like that. So wisdom or intelligence, I mean, any human sort of human thought, which related with reasoning, then intelligence or wisdom always there.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think that has tremendous relevance to psychotherapy, and it strikes me that maybe the kind of motivation that you're talking about for the great bodhisattva commitment to prajna and to healing all people, serving all people, is something that we might introduce within psychotherapy and bring back into psychotherapy in terms of like a Hippocratic oath for psychotherapists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to give Dr. Alyssa Eli an opportunity to speak with you.
I am a psychiatrist who sees psychotic patients in a day clinic. And 2 evenings a week, I travel to some of the homeless shelters around Boston and see people there. The patients that I see hear voices that speak cruelly to them. They believe they're being punished for crimes they haven't committed. They believe that horrific things will happen to them that are not going to happen to them. And sometimes they cannot forget the horrific things that have happened to them. I prescribe their medications, I sit with them, I hold their hand metaphorically, I admire their strength, and I say, hold on, if you just hang on, things will change and get better. If you take your medication, if you come to the clinic, if you don't drink, if you don't use drugs, if you hold on, your symptoms will diminish, your lives will improve. But that is not true. Many of the patients I see have done this for years, and their lives have not improved. Their symptoms have not grown better. They've worsened. Their illnesses have not diminished. They have increased. So my question for you, which I ask selfishly but hopefully, is there something you can say to me, to us, that we can bring back to our patients to help them, whose lives are so difficult, whose lives may not change, and whose lives we ourselves might not be able to endure?
Yeah. Beautiful. I think now precise answer for that question is I don't know. They like it. Again, this morning I mentioned the individual case. There are some individuals who have some faith. Then religious faith. Then accordingly some
Different approach.
because of the different approach. Even someone who are non-believer but still have some sort of respected friend, including their parent, can be, you see, use their name. And yesterday, I think I mentioned for example, someone whose
Loved one. Loved one.
a loved one passed away, and too much worry, some that kind of question. So I mentioned my own case, my own experience, and my tutor, senior tutor, passed away. At that time, I felt usually I had the feeling I have some solid rock
To lean on.
to lean on. Now that's no longer there. So some very disturbances. But then I felt, now no use to keep sort of this sort of, what's it,
Grief.
or grief or desperate sort of feeling. And I remember my late tutor, he wished me a healthy person and something useful life, meaningful life. So if I too much worry, too much sadness, he also feel more sad. If I, in spite of his death, I carry his instruction, his teaching sincerely and without sort of too much disturbance on my mind, that's the best way to serve or to present gift.
To serve his wishes and offer a gift to his
So it's someone who, I think, who may, for example, who have very kind mother or father or someone, then remember, now no longer on this planet, but still, if your parent some way knows your condition, you have too much worry, too much desperate sort of feeling, brings more worry, more sadness to your loving parents. Things now already happen. There's no way to overcome that. Now just worry is additional suffering. Think, our life, always there are different aspects. Any reality, many different aspects. So, from one way, from one angle, it is disaster. But the same event, if you look from another angle, maybe not that kind of disaster. Even some positive things may be there. So that's, I think, important. There's someone who always look from one direction or sad, negative side, think negative, worry. Now, I often make example, our own case. We lost our own country, a lot of sort of problems. If you look only that aspect, then more worry, more sadness. But if you look from another angle, because of this tragic situation, creates new opportunity. If I still in Lhasa, Potala, I may not participate here. Harvard University sort of some discussions. And we personally also, you see, there's no opportunity to meet with a variety of people, and from I could learn many, many things. So I myself consider most holy person in Potala, so remain like that. Waste of time. And remain with distance with reality. It's fooling oneself. No use. So I think every life, when our life go through okay, then there smoothly, then there is time to pretend. But when you're passing through difficult, no time to pretend. You must be realistic. You must accept the reality. So, in a life, the difficult period is very useful in order to become realistic person. I think in this country, for example, I think your ancestors, the first sort of settlers, I think they really work very hard. So a lot of sort of hardship. So they are, because of hardship, as a person more tougher than those younger people. And European continent also, and Japan also, the younger generation, not experience that kind of difficulties. So sometimes their life more spoiled, like that. And in Tibetan community, in India also, those elder people who firstly come to our settlement and work hard, they are very tough. And for such people, small difficulties may not disturb much. Then a spoiled one, small things disturb a lot. So therefore, tragedy is good. It really, Kasota, shundarchava.
It So like the burning makes the earthen jar firing. Earthen jar makes it very tough and strong. In the same manner, tragedy makes you grow and become stronger.
That does not mean tragedy is good. No. Must avoid. But if something happens, then think that line. It's better.
Thank you for that very valuable perspective. I'd like to give Dr. Linehan an opportunity to speak with you.
Well, I am extremely happy to be here. And I want to answer your question. What is psychology? You may have a different answer. But as a scientist myself, I think of psychology as the science of behavior, including the behavior of the mind. And, but I want to say... And as psychologists in psychotherapy research are starting to study mindfulness. A colleague of mine that I work with, Alan Marlatt, said at a major conference, what are we doing, psychologists, studying this without inviting the people who really understand it, the spiritual leaders such as you? So I'm so grateful for you to be here and that Harvard brings together you, the Dalai Lama, with scientists and brings these two together because it is so important. But I want to move to my question.
세상 psychology 가르쳐다. So what is the meaning of psychology?
Study of human. 그다 영화가 쥐어봐. 내 꾸는 그다 꾸는 거 제발진 게 쥐어버려야. 남주다 쥐어버려야 제발치에서.
Then psychology is not mind.
No,
Psychology is not a study of mind.
it is a study of the mind.
네. 제발.
Oh,
네.
You study it also, of course.
그래 그다
Now, your answer, instead of solving problem, create more confusion. So seems psychology is some method to investigate mind, not mind itself.
psychological 단위 배우체면 psychologist 되고 제바체로
왜? I see. And when this person is psychologically something because of psychologically. I don't know.
Ask your question.
Now I feel I'm still in the kindergarten. So yet to learn many things. I don't know.
Might I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. I develop
The psychological material.
So don't ask about psychology.
no.
Yes.
I develop. I'm a psychotherapy researcher, and in the research that I do, I treat the most stigmatized patients, the ones no one else wants to treat, because no one sees them as wise at all.
돈이 만들어. 수지 돈이 만들어. Yes.
So I, in developing a treatment, told all the patients, and I told my graduate students too, that they have wise mind, the capacity for wisdom. But then, and I said, you too can be wise, and you can engage in wise action. And so the patient said to me, well, what is wise action? And how do I know if my behavior is wise? My drug addicts are effective at getting drugs, and they want to know, is that wise? And I looked it in the dictionary, and I couldn't figure it out myself, so I'm really asking you, for my patients, how do you know if behavior or action is wise, and how do you determine wise action?
싫어지. 가. 네. 뭐라? I think from the Buddhist viewpoint, one event, one factor, whether positive or negative, sometimes it's difficult to
Distinguish.
distinguish from itself,
By itself.
by itself. So, from the research side, look from the research side, or from motivation side, from other 당연한 디상거리. 개월 다 미교원이 잘어야 원이지 개와도 미교와. 숭대지 개와도 미교와. 안 그래. 그런 게 개도 미교와. 독실도.
So,
원이지 개와서는 로커라 개와서야지.
so open up this question a little bit because it raises the point about what action constitutes wholesome as versus unwholesome. And in the Buddhist context, there's a recognition that some actions may be wholesome by their very nature of the act itself. But there could be other actions which are
Or
wholesome,
action or mind.
or action or a state of mind which are wholesome by their very nature. But some can be wholesome because of the underlying motivation, the state of mind that gave rise to them.
그래 뭐 전에 지금도 그렇지.
So in these cases, one may not be able to actually define the act itself or the mental itself as wholesome, but rather
원이지 개미기 좀 미투지.
so by itself you cannot define one way or another, but you can define something as wholesome because of the underlying motivation that gave rise to it. And then some mental state or action can be defined as wholesome because of the concomitant state of mind. There may be other mental processes which are present at the same time that support it, and that's what makes them wholesome.
그래 리뷰션에 그래서.
그래서 뭐 정된체, 고노체, 뭐 이게.
So then, some action, whether wise or not, but I think they should judge from the result viewpoint.
From the point of view of consequence.
Otherwise, no one shall account.
So otherwise, it's very difficult to pick the action itself and say this is
Yeah.
wise versus unwise.
But you look at the consequences.
Yes. With some action carried sincere motivation.
Sincere motivation.
Sincere motivation. So from the motivation viewpoint, is positive, wholesome. But since that method become unrealistic method due to lack of knowledge or awareness about the reality. So then the result will be negative. So from the result viewpoint, that action then consider wrong.
Unwise.
So from result side, so 꿀루구 찬에 겨와 그런 데뷔 찬에 다 꿀루구 찬에 양다와 데뷔 찬에 양마다보다 좋은 거.
So therefore, this throws up the complexity of situations where the underlying motivation may be wholesome, and then the act, because of the way in which it is done, may result in negative consequences. So from the point of view of consequence, the same act is unwholesome and unwise.
So that can be possible because things are relative.
So this is because everything is dependent upon context and relative. So just like long and short, you can only contextually define what is long and what is short.
So good and bad, also basically that's that field.
That field.
Some good thing compare extremely good thing, then this is bad. The bad and the good compare with bad is good. So like that. So everything, you see, kasota, interconnected. So now this is a broad one, Buddhist important concept. No independent self. Everything related with other, due to other factor. So that, again, very helpful to loosening or grasping. Good is good, absolute, that loose. Bad is absolute bad. And
Of course, there's the problem that in the end, there will be nothing left to point your finger at.
What?
there is a nihilism.
Nothing left to point your finger at.
You don't know who to
There is a nihilism. So now must avoid that. And also the grasping, there's another sort of absolutism,
Extreme love.
extreme. So between there, we call middle way. So the best thing is, tension level jungwa yinzang, tenne takwa yinzang, yoris. Tenne takwa yinzang, mo motoris.
That's why in Buddhism, the understanding of the interdependent nature of reality becomes very crucial. Therefore, one's understanding of the reality of anything must be grounded upon appreciation of its very interconnected nature. And then this appreciation of the interdependent nature will also help us be released from our tendency to grasp at some kind of solidity and absolute reality.
One thing, when I met this is some foreigner, and also some Tibetans also, they said due to some tragedy, it's very too much worry. For example, there's one, I think, person who they the people who brought that person, they described him as a mad person. Then, in front of that person, they quite loudly mentioned, this is mentally something wrong.
Unstable love.
Oh, mad person. Then I told him, that doesn't matter. In a certain level, everybody mad. In the sense, we are servant of ignorance. So ignorance dominates our mind from the Buddhist viewpoint now. So we always get the sort of impression, distorted information, distorted appearance. So we take that as a reality. So we act according to that appearance. So essentially, mad.
Deluded love.
Deluded love.
Deluded love.
So you see, in order to, if you tell, oh, you are mad, then his or her mind becomes more discouraged. Then less willingness to recover or to be another normal human being. So that's, I think, very, very important to give every encouragement. And especially those sort of the prisoners, you see, they treat them as a part of society and part of our community, and give them hope and confidence. And through that way, realize their past mistake, but potential to become a normal, good human being. That I feel important. Sometimes the people treat these people more negatively.
Inferior.
Inferior. then that I think actually block the possibility of recover.
Thank you. I'd like to give Dr. Pinker an opportunity to perhaps tell us what psychology is or go off in a different direction.
Yes, now I'm hoping more precise explanation about the psychology.
I would define psychology as the science of mind, both the science of thinking, how we reason, how we remember, how we imagine, how we speak and understand language, and also the science of emotion, of love and hate and fear, and the moral emotions like anger and gratitude and guilt and compassion and trust. And I'm going to ask you a psychological question that is very much related to your life's work. You are the world's foremost symbol of nonviolent political change. You are devoted to the idea that the terrible violence and oppression in Tibet can change for the better. And in many ways, there are positive signs in history that human behavior can change and that we can become less violent. Over many centuries, humanity has abolished barbaric practices like slavery and crucifixion and burning at the stake and human sacrifice. Even in the past 50 years, we have seen a reduction in the number of wars between nations and events that would have been deemed incredible just 3 decades ago, such as the fall of the Soviet Empire without a major war, the end of apartheid in South Africa without a bloodbath or massacre. So there are optimistic signs. By many criteria, we have become a more peaceful species. The question is, if our biological nature has not changed, we still have impulses toward violence and self-deception and impulsiveness and greed. What are the positive aspects of human nature that have been engaged over the centuries and decades? Is it a widening sense of empathy so that we don't just feel compassion for our own clan or family, but for larger and larger groups? Is it inhibition and self-control? Is it passing justice from our own biased selves to disinterested third parties like the rule of law and government? Is it trade and exchange where globalization makes it more profitable to cooperate with people than to invade them? There are many possibilities for what parts of the mind are increasingly engaged. What do you think those parts of the mind are, and how can we best engage them to continue the progress toward nonviolence in human history?
Correct. Okay. That's my favorite subject, right? Basically, human nature, I believe, more gentleness, or more compassionate. The reason, biologically, at the time of our birth, I think the mother ready to provide milk, care. So that moment, the dominant force, dominant emotion in our mind is love. Tremendous sort of affection to that person who provide us as nourishment, right?
Nurturing.
Nurturing, including milk. Although that time, I think the cognitive, more detailed cognitive sort of mind not yet developed. So the child may not have the knowledge, this is my mother, but simply biological factor, totally rely. And so long remain with that, feel happy, separate, uncomfortable, fear. So at that time, aggressiveness, even though occasionally maybe, but dominant, not dominant, very clear. So affection, whole 24 hours. And since our life started that way, and very nature, our survival entirely depend on others' care. In order to bring that energy to caring boy or children, the mother's side need some kind of tremendous will. That brings by affection. So that by nature now. I often used to telling people, my curiosity, like you see turtle, some turtle, or butterfly, some other the species of mammals, whose youngsters' survival not depend on mother's care. Those animals, if we put together the youngster, for example, the youngster, turtle, and its mother put together, I don't think the both sides have the capacity to show affection. It's not necessary. Survive by itself. So we belongs the other type. Is it caring by mother? Depend entirely on mother. Birds, some sort of animal like cats, dogs, all these. So we belong that. But particularly we need milk, like that. So because of that, biological factor, now the scientists are my guru now. You see, they found the compassionate mind very good for our health, good health, for our body element and peace of mind go very well. Agitated mind not go well. So therefore, our body, basic nature of body, much more closer to calm mind. Compassion brings calm mind. Anger destroys our calm mind. Very clear. So therefore, appreciation of love, compassion, by nature. And compassionate attitude, I think full of compassion, I think little chance of the tell lie. With compassionate motivation brings honesty, truthful, justice. With anger motivation, cheating, lie, bully, all these negative verbal action as well as physical action. So therefore, our basic nature is, I believe, more compassionate. Compassionate, very much need for our health, for our life. That's a dominant force. Therefore, all actions, verbal action, physical action, which closer that mind is by nature we appreciate. So in the society, I think truthful, whether educated or uneducated, or Eastern or Western or Southern, or poor or rich, everybody appreciate truthful, honest. Right? So therefore, war, concept of war, is an act of bully, motivated, most cases, anger, hatred. I think through experiences out of war, out of violence, during 20th century, we human beings, humanity, I think, gained much more experiences. Result, as I mentioned before, we become more mature. So we realize our own mistake. So I think tendency more kasota towards more peace, non-violence. Non-violence, of course, bound to happen because our problem is still there. Always the problem is bound to happen. So that problem, not to bring violence, but some way to solve that problem, that's non-violence. So long problem there, the concept of non-violence, very much relevant.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
So I think the last I think one encouraging sort of statement or expression, the late Queen Mother, the British Queen Mother, 1996, her own age, 96. So at that time, I had opportunity, one audience. Since my childhood, her picture and that fat, the lady, is very, very familiar in my mind. And also her husband during Second World War. I think very nice person. So in any way, so I had some sort of keen desire to meet her, one of the audience with her. So when I met, I asked her, since the most part of this 20th century you witness, so humanity, we becoming more better or more or less remain same or worsen? Without hesitation, she mentioned better. Then she mentioned, when she was young, no concept of human right, no concept of self-determination. Nowadays, these become universal value, she mentioned. I think this quite an authentic statement, I think. One lady, not a politician. Then very old, so not much sort of concern about her future. So I think she mentioned these things.
Thank you. I believe, Your Holiness, that sad for us, it's time for you to move on. There are other people who are very much looking forward to meeting with you today. And speaking for the entire group, I'd like to thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you. So perhaps I think, oh yes, okay.
Great to see you.
Photo op.
I want one. I didn't get one.
Thank you. 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 Yeah. You? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Special thank for bring more confusion. So special thank.
What do you say?
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
answer.
Thank you. तो दे बोल चुका.
Thank you.
No, no. Earlier you gave me one. If you
Really?
like. Oh, okay.
But I
thank
think
you.
no. One very well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Holiness. Thank you for a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Hi, thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you.